Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Price and Value Journey. My guest today is Dennis Jackson. He is the founder of WorX Solutions, a company dedicated to helping small and mid-sized businesses streamline their operations, optimize workflows, and turn raw data into actionable insights. Lots of discernible ROI in all that work. We're going to get into that. Dennis started WorX after leaving the corporate world, and we'll dive into some of that journey that he made, why he made the leap, the lessons he's learned about operational efficiency, communicating the value of operational efficiency, and of course, we'll get into pricing along the way, maybe a little bit, and how he helps businesses gain a competitive edge in that work. Dennis is also the co-host of the WFH with Two Guys podcast. That's Work From Home with Two Guys podcast, alongside Benny Carrion. Let's shout out to Benny. And they explore the realities of not just remote work, but of business ownership. And we'll talk about what he's learned from his experience as a podcast guest, why he's one of those few podcasts that are in the distinct minority that is still going after getting started in 2020. And congratulations to Dennis on that, and Dennis and Benny on that. And we'll talk about how podcasting has influenced his business. Dennis, thanks for joining me.
John, great to be here. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and sharing your insights. But before we get into the meat of what we were going to talk about, let's talk about WorX Solutions and how you're serving folks out there.
Yeah. So what we do, and we'll probably get into my background as well, because my background is purchasing, real estate, logistics, and I've worked in several different industries. If you look at my resume, it's like you think I'm job hopping, but I was actually ahead of the entrepreneurial world in that I was in corporate America, but I would stay 3 or 4 years and then move on. And that plays a big part in why I started WorX Solutions. And so we really work with small to mid-size, just finding a problem that they've got. And a lot of times they don't even know they've got it. The red flags are usually heavy users of Excel spreadsheets, systems that aren't talking to each other, and reports you can't get efficiently. And so that's usually where it starts. We'll go in, and that can be as simple as a CRM. It could be a workflow tool. It could be helping with inventory, because many of our clients are in QuickBooks and they're trying to manage inventory in QuickBooks. And I always tell people QuickBooks is an accounting tool. That's the debit and credit. Inventory, there's a lot more that happens to inventory well before it becomes a debit and credit. So helping people around that side. It can be in and we don't have any specific industry that we focus on. It's really agnostic to that, because everybody has the same problems. And it doesn't matter if you're small or large. You end up with multiple systems. You end up with lots of Excel spreadsheets, and things go awry. And you need to figure out a way to make things better. And that's where we come in and help and bring it to life. And our clients are all over the US, and they're in all kinds of different industries. We do a lot in manufacturing, logistics, construction, interior design are some of the areas. One of my clients, if you buy gas at Costco, they help Costco manage that crude oil buying that then goes into the gas stations for you guys to buy gas at Costco. My background, I used to be at 7-Eleven, and I used to be in charge of gasoline operations east of the Mississippi. That's where we're different than most companies, in that all my team has lots of strong background in different industries, and we actually help you look at it from your industry perspective, not from a techie perspective. And that's the aha that really helps people a lot.
Oh, that's compelling. What I find interesting about what you do, Dennis, is how many companies are still managing out of Excel spreadsheets.
I was on a podcast yesterday with someone, and we were talking about AI, and we said, yeah, you hear all about AI, but I'm going to say there's still 60 or 70% of companies that are still in Excel spreadsheets. They've got some systems, but they're not even close to the AI world that everybody's talking about. And it's amazing how many people still just live in QuickBooks and manage out of QuickBooks and run their whole business in QuickBooks. And I always tell people, look at who designed the system. QuickBooks was designed by an accounting system. It does accounting really well, but it is not going to do your CRM. It's not going to do your operational type things.
Right.
Salesforce the same way. It has sales in it. It's really good at sales, but if you want it to be operational or accounting, probably not going to be their strong suit. And there's great tools today that allow those all to connect and move that data back and forth to each other. But unfortunately, a lot of companies rely on manual labor to push that data back and forth to those other systems. And I think where Elon Musk is finding that out in the government, that we're finding there's lots of stuff happening that was manual that can be automated, and that's what's changing their world real quick on them.
Yeah, for sure. So what's the reluctance to change beyond the fact they haven't talked to you yet?
Change it, the way they do it, it works for them, but it's not the most efficient way. Usually most of the time they're thinking about growing, and they realize they can't throw more labor at whatever the processes they're trying to do, or they can, but they're going to spend as much in labor as they're going to make in the new profits. And so that's the aha where it comes to light that they've got to have something better, and they need more continuity and collaboration and some kind of system. And that's where we'll get pulled in. Most of ours, they're not even shopping for what we do. It's usually through referrals, through the podcast, through our existing client base and my network of people that I know is how we connect with people. Because again, we're coming at it from that non-techie side, because most of them have experienced some kind of software in the past, and it probably wasn't real positive. Either it didn't work, or the salesperson sold them on something that it looked great, but when reality hit, it didn't do all the things that they said it was going to do. Or to get there was going to be another $5,000 or $10,000 that they just didn't have to get there.
Right.
And so they've had bad experiences with it. So that's where we come in, and we try to, first off, understand what their issues are. A lot of times they want to eat the whole elephant, and we'll say, hey, step back. Let's find something small that's, one, not going to cost a lot, and give you a quick win, allowing you to see how we work and how we help you solve a problem. And then also on our side, we're looking at, do we like these people? Do we enjoy working with them? Because I look at this as not as a job. It's actually a gift to give back to people and help people be more efficient. And if they're not graceful and gracious about it, I don't like working with them. And so all of my clients that I work with they're really great people. They're giving back to their clients and helping their companies and their people. And so we spend a lot of time on our side making sure we're a good fit.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. People ask me, what's an ideal client? Here's something you don't put on a website. They can't be a jerk, right? Earned the ability to say that because you've got your own business, right? That's part of the reason you have your own business.
Yeah, that first year or two, you took clients no matter what, because you wanted the business.
Sure.
As you get going after year 3 and you're making money and life's good, as a business owner, it's okay to be picky about who you partner with, because I got into this partly because I wanted to give back. If you looked at my story in 2011, when we started this in 2012, the company I was in, corporate America, was going through layoffs, and it seemed like every year about November we would have layoffs. And so this was like the 8th year that I got to lay off people. And I was like, I don't want to do this. So I went to my boss and said, hey, instead of laying me off or laying them off, I'll take their severance package. And it was time to go do something. And that's one of those moments where you can use it as a negative or as a positive. And I chose to make it a positive because I was tired of corporate America. I knew I wanted to do something different. And I knew they were going to give me a severance package that provided me a runway. And it's, let's do it. The worst case is I don't make it. I'll go back to corporate America. So I took the buyout, and then 2 months later, I found out my dad has Alzheimer's and only has 3 months to live. So he passes in March.
Wow.
November of that year, my mom dies as well. So you look at 11 and early 12, it's okay. That's a sad time. It was actually the best time of my life because I wasn't working. I was building the business, and I got to be with my mom and dad at the end of their life. And then at the end, they leave my sister and I a nice inheritance, which allowed me then that even a longer runway to go beyond starting that business. Because that first year or two are tough. It doesn't matter what your business is and how good your game plan is. It's going to be a challenge because sales don't happen exactly like you expect, or there's unseen costs that you if you go to my website, worksolution.com, that extra S on the end was going to be $2,500, and I didn't have $2,500. So we only provide one solution, I joke. But it was one of those things back in the day, I just didn't have $2,500 extra to spend on an S at that time to make it worksolutions.com. So
I got you. I love that. So you talk about making that jump and all the contacts you had in corporate at that time.
Yeah.
Right. And I think one of the common things we all learn coming out of corporate is how much of our reputation was the name on the business card that wasn't ours. In other words, the firm that we were working at. Right. And how that changes when we jump into our own business, and suddenly all these great contacts we had that we thought were going to help us get going are a little squishy.
They definitely rely. Luckily, I had built a strong network of people throughout this. Benny, who does the podcast with me, was a vendor of mine at the time when I was in corporate America. So he was selling to me, and we had developed a relationship. When I jumped, we were actually looking at becoming operators for Chick-fil-A, and we were going through the process. And their process is very thorough and very time consuming.
Yeah.
And at that point, I gave up. That it was like I wasn't going to get there. And internally at this, I was working at a healthcare company here in Nashville, that there was a platform that we had brought on in 2009. So if you think back to 2009, the cloud existed, but we didn't all really understand what the cloud was in 2009 yet. And we were using this, and we started it. We were one of their first clients, and we started, and we use it today. The platform's called TrackVia. The platform we had started, we had 3 or 4 people using it. 3 years later, we had 600 people using it in some form or fashion in the company. So I knew there was something to their software and the cloud tool that they had. And so I approached them in that October, November timeframe when the healthcare company I was at said, "Hey, we don't want you to stay." They were selling to large companies. And I said, "I think there's lots of small to mid-sized companies that could use this, but they won't know what to do with it. And they'll try to build it like a spreadsheet. And I get a decent cost so that when I go out to sell it, that I can make some money at it." I'm like, "Sure, give it a shot." And that's where my parents pass away. I didn't get that inheritance. I had 4 or 5 companies. I was in charge of real estate and purchasing at this healthcare company. So we had just built a 500,000 square foot building. So I had lots of people that were working with me, from contractors and all that. And they lived in Excel spreadsheet hell. And so I went to 3 of those and said, "I think I can make your life easier, because I was your recipient of those stupid Excel spreadsheets that my boss, the CFO, would yell and scream at me that this is not going to be right. And if I had a database that I could have worked in, I could have made my boss happier and made my life would have been a lot less stressful." And so 3 of those companies I started with, one of them had a contract with an auto company here in the US that they were potentially they were struggling with the account and they were getting blamed for all the issues. They were an interior design firm. They were working with this company, and I knew Marjorie that was in charge of this company. I said, "Marjorie, you were responsive. You did really well. Let me look and see what the problem was." The problem was that the people at the car dealerships were not giving her feedback in time, but she was getting blamed for everything being late. And I'm like, "You need a workflow tool that keeps track of that lets those senior VPs know who the problem, that you're not the problem. You're just at the end of that mountain. You're that snowball, and it's getting bigger, and you get blamed for problems that were happening much earlier." So she was my first client, and we put it together, and she still has that auto company today, and they're doing much more business than they were back in 2011 when we started the relationship.
Oh, wow.
And so that's how I got started. And then TrackVia was gracious enough that they would send some leads to us as well. And then through networking and meeting people and finding those key relationships, it just to begin to gradually grow. And today we have about 125 companies that we support and doing stuff, and life's good. So it's one of those, but to your point, they referenced that name when I was at Frito-Lay or 7-Eleven, that carried a lot of weight.
Sure.
My coaching to people that are in corporate America, develop networks and relationships today while you're still in corporate America, and find out who are people that you want to stay in touch with because at some point you are going to leave, either on your choice or theirs.
Right.
Most of you are not going to stay in the same company forever. And so find out who those people are and then keep in touch with them, because you find out which ones are friends and which ones just used you. If that's, and used you because you were part of that company. And there's a strong number of them that are good friends today, and either clients or referrals. And that's part of why we started our podcast, was we wanted to be able to highlight people that we knew in the industry and companies that we had worked with, to allow them to get their message out, because a lot of my clients could use their services that they were doing.
So it sounds like your relative success in, I guess, finding that niche was that you first of all weren't competitive with your corporate employer, and because you were going after a different niche than they were going at, size niche, and they had a reason to, I would think, to cheer you on, because you might be seeding some business for them along the way.
Exactly. And it was one where you find those niches or those relationships that work well. And so TrackV is one. We have other platforms that we work with today that they're selling their brands out there that you see, but they're focused on bigger companies. And there's a lot of small to mid-sized companies that can use the same tools. And I said, with AI coming, that smaller business has the ability to be a lot more flexible, a lot more nimble. AI can make them much more powerful than bigger companies, because they don't have to go through corporate America. You got to go through all this stupid committees and approvals, and AI is scary to big companies if you think about it, because there's things happening and they like to check off and validate things. Sometimes AI is running and doing, where as a small business, as long as it's not going to kill someone and hurt someone real bad, you may still make a decision. And Susie over here is probably making it anyhow. So if you can add some AI to make Susie more efficient, life's good, and you can potentially double your client base without doing a whole lot of work.
Yeah, and the nice thing is you can do it incrementally, right? That's the beautiful piece of it. It's like you mentioned the client that wanted to eat the whole elephant. You don't have to do that.
Right. I always tell people, step back. God didn't build the world in one day. He took 7. So take time, do things smaller. And I go back, we were believers, but in 2011, I really turned to God for faith. And it was one that for me, I remember in October of that year, I walked into church, and on the board, they had a message board. It was, maybe you've been somewhere too long. It's time to dust the dirt off your feet. That was what stirred me to say, hey, maybe it's time to make a change. Made that change. And initially when I started, I had a partner, and that would be something else we can talk about here in a minute. I was not a good partner working with a lot of other people. I've found that it's because I didn't want to get big fast. They wanted to get big and have a building with their name on it. And I was like, that's not where I wanted to go. So make sure, if you're going to have partners, talk to each other. Luckily, we had good documentation and we were able to split amicably and things were good. But partnerships it's nice to be an entrepreneur by yourself. It's lonely at times.
Right.
But there's things there. But we were working on our mission statement, and we walked into church together. We both went to the same church, walked in, and on this board it said, do you know what your mission is for life? And it was like, okay. And it was 1 Timothy. It was a clear conscience, pure heart, and love of God. And I said, that's our mission. So it's to help from our heart. We're going to be pure and honest, clear conscience, to think and open up ideas and help people make life better. And so I try to apply that in everything we do across the business. And it's as simple as that. Keep it simple.
Yeah, that's great. What other challenges that we haven't gotten to that you had when you're starting the company?
Yeah. So if you're starting a business, I always tell people, definitely find a good accountant, because you're going to need that bookkeeping accountant help you navigate through, because a lot of people forget that Uncle Sam's got to get their tax dollars no matter what. And so you could you think you're making all this money, and at the end of the year, it's, oh shit, I got to pay taxes. So make sure you do that and pay it quarterly. It makes it a lot easier. Yeah. And then if you're going to have employees, make sure you understand your state laws and how you're paying those things. That was not an area that I was strong in the first month or two. I was like, oh, I forgot that. And so then you get a bill from the state that it's $100 for the tax, but there's a $300 charge because you're late. So it's okay. You better get your act together on some of this stuff, because the state and federal government they're going to get their money no matter. And then also, I would say an attorney is important because you want to make sure you've got the legal stuff documented, especially if you're going to have partners or business people working with you, and then having those contracts documented between you and your clients, because you want to make sure you're represented and they're represented, and people, because when you're dating, it's great and hunky-dory, but if something goes wrong, you're turning to that legal document. And so very seldom have I had to turn to it, but when I have, we've had that document there that helps navigate us through whatever those challenges were. The other big challenge is cash flow is a challenge. That you're setting those estimates of here's what we think we're going to do, and things don't happen exactly like you think it's going to happen. And in 2020, that pandemic thing came along, and for us, that was actually a good thing because people then started moving to home, and they needed more systems. So for us, it was a win, but for lots of people that I was working with, it was a scary time because nobody knew where the revenue is going to come in, what was going to happen. The PP loans were helpful to many of those small businesses that we were working with to navigate through that. And then listen to podcasts. One thing I was listening to and learned, this was back 7 years ago, they were talking about R&D tax credits. And I started listening, and it talked about that if you were helping small companies streamline business and do things, because the government knew there was going to be a shortage of labor at some point in time. So there was this R&D tax credit that was out there to help companies automate because they knew there weren't going to be enough people to support all the jobs that were coming in the future. So I would start talking to this guy. Lo and behold, I ended up getting like a $35,000 tax credit per year for all these projects that we're doing that otherwise I'd be paying tax on that. So that was a huge windfall that by listening and continuing to educate myself and talk to people, because my accountant, she did not know about this. And most accountants that I've talked to did not know about some of these. And they change, every year when the Congress changes, those R&D tax credits are flexing and doing different things. And so just those are things to think about that when you're in corporate America, you've got a staff of people that are probably focused on those different things.
Exactly.
You become that expert on everything in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
The other one, and John, you probably experienced this one as an entrepreneur, it's lonely at times when you're just here. And that's why it's important to create networks and relationships with people and have those conversations and talk to people, because you don't have that manager that's at the same level down the hall that you can go talk to about this shitty customer or this shitty employee or whatever that's going on, that you could always kind of close the door and talk to someone and say, how would you handle this? You lose that when you're a solopreneur, that there's no one to really talk to. And so I quickly found a group of about 6 people that I call my advisory board, that we get together once a month and just talk about issues that are closed door and aren't going to be shared with anyone. And you can take their advice or you can leave it, but at least gives you some insight of how to maybe navigate through some of the things that you hadn't thought about.
Yeah, that's terrific advice. And that's something that I couldn't agree with you more. And that's something you don't think about when you're in corporate, ready to make the leap. Planning for that ahead of time, as far ahead as you can, is really valuable. And of course, once you make the leap, then you meet others that really you ought to think about adding into that informal advisory board, as you call it.
Yeah. And that's right. People that are in corporate America today, if you're thinking, hey, in 3 or 4 years, I want to start my own business, network now. You got the greatest opportunity, because one, you may have people that want to sell to you anyhow. So be gracious and meet with them. You don't have to buy them, but at least give them the opportunity. And in the background and in your notes, keep track of, hey, I met this person, and stay in touch with them. So when you make that leap, you've got that relationship and those people to go to already. Because I see so many people start businesses and they didn't network, and they get out there and they just sit there. You've got to be out there. You got to be, and everybody's a salesperson. That was another one I ran into, because a lot of people, I'm in accounting. In a small business, you're all sales. Doesn't matter if you're accounting, operations, because you're interacting with the customer. So anytime you touch a customer, you have the opportunity to either make their experience positive, which is still a sale in a roundabout way, because they could take their business and go elsewhere. Or 2, you could share with them ideas of things that you've learned, or you hear things and you can get it back to that salesperson to help say, hey, I heard Susie talk about this thing here. We might be able to help them. Go talk to them. So everybody's a salesperson. I was at a networking event not too long ago, and this person was like, oh, I don't do sales. I'm like, then you're going to have a tough time because we're all salespeople.
Yeah.
The key thing was, I think in her mind, she was not a car salesperson. And I said, you don't want to be that kind of person. You want to be a true relationship person. You want to listen. You want to ask lots of questions. You want to be able to introduce and help connect people to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Because networking is a two-way street. A side note here, John, I have my CRM, I have people listed as A, Bs, or Cs. A's are, they have good connections and I'm willing to connect them. B's are, they play, but they don't usually connect. And C's are, they just want me to connect and they never offer connections for me. And those C's are not real good people. I want the A's and B's because I want people that I can connect, but also people that will in return connect me with other people in their network.
A valuable field to have in your CRM, folks. And if you don't have a CRM, you better get one of those too. Dennis can help you with that.
And a lot of people say, what's a CRM? It's just keeping track of your relationships. Who are all the people? And then it's all those follow-ups and tasks because, again, people live in sticky notes and stuff. And so if you don't follow up, they're going to forget you. And networking is, I always tell people, networking is hope you meet the right people. You hope they'll introduce you. I've actually started a group called Good People, which is reverse networking. And we use Sales Navigator as the tool. So you put your criteria in, you identify who the people they're connected with, and then you ask for the introduction. And you say, hey, John, it looks like Bob and John. We do a quick email introduction for me. It puts the onus back on me. So it's not hope. It's me asking a favor from you because we've developed a relationship. Me, I know you, and you're happy to do that introduction versus you trying to remember, here's all the things Dennis does. And you hope that you'll introduce me at some point in time. So check out a Good People is a good one that we're doing a lot now. And there's about 50 of us here in Nashville that we started this 3 years ago. And that's really working really well.
Yeah. Wow. That's what great advice. So let's talk about, you're in the world of operational efficiency, I guess you might call it, right? And let's talk about how you communicate value there, because this is, I don't envy you, I guess is where I'm going with this. And I would imagine that you can have a lot to teach in this regard to others who have trouble communicating something that can be hard to communicate from a values perspective.
It's changed a lot. And after reading your book has been a huge help recently, because we used to be heavy focused hourly, that we'd sit there and say, oh, it's going to take us 10 hours to build this thing or 50 hours or whatever. And then we just say, hey, our hourly rate is X. And that was what we charged. And it didn't matter if it was going to make you really more efficient. They all made you more efficient, but it's like we weren't getting a part of that win or helping move along. So in the past year, after reading your book and doing some things, I try to understand what is it we're going to do. And usually we never replace a person per se. We help you avoid having to hire future people. And especially when a couple of years ago after the pandemic, when people were leaving, it was like, that was a great way. You could lose that body, put efficiencies in, and the money went to the bottom line because now you didn't have to pay I always said 45,000. It's more than that for a person. I use 45,000 kind of as that base number is here's what you're going to have for a body. By the time you pay them benefits, in today's world, it's probably closer to 60,000. And ours sometimes as low as 5,000 to 30,000 to build something out. It just depends on how complex and what's going on. But if we can help you avoid having to hire a new person, that's an ROI that I can then show you back and help you see that here's the value that this brought. And ours is a one-time fee, and then you're paying a monthly license for support after that. So it exponentially, that ROI gets bigger over time because Bob would have been there and you'd have been paying Bob for $60,000 a year for years upon years. Ours, you pay it a year, and then after that, it's a much lower fee and your ROI is much bigger. So we talk a lot about, we try to understand what's your budget, what are you trying to solve for, what are the wins, and then we price it accordingly. It's fair to the customer, and we're not being extravagant. Again, sometimes I'm my own worst enemy because I used to be VP of purchasing. And so I've had people say, quit negotiating with yourself, because I try to get the price lower because I'm looking out for my clients to say, because I feel IT has charged people way too much. I saw many corporate America where they, and Elon Musk has found this, that they sign up for stuff and they just keep paying for stuff and then they aren't using it. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I want something where we're in it with you, and that if you're not using, I'm going to let you know, and let's just end the relationship. And so that puts onus on me to make sure that the tool's working correctly and that you're getting a win out of the system that we're building for you.
Yeah, I would imagine though, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would imagine though that clients come to you not thinking about necessarily saving a person. What they come to you with is, I can't make this happen anymore, and they've hit a wall, and the spreadsheet life is just completely irrational and is in a way is collapsed on them, just maybe because of their growth or what have you. And so they're not necessarily thinking from an ROI point of view.
Right. No, they're thinking of it as they're going to Target to buy a bar of soap, or they see it as a cost.
Yeah.
And so that we always try, and it's not, we don't hammer it home, but we're always trying to say, hey, how can we help? Is it going to help you grow revenue? Is it going to help you lower some costs somewhere? And we've got many clients that will then speak up that we can share as referrals that say, hey, here's where we got wins. I had one that this was not even where we started, but we got in there because it was a workflow efficiency for people in the field. And they were a construction company. And so they do flooring and tiling. So if you think about it, a home starts, and we've all experienced, I'm building a house right now. The contractor says that it's going to be ready it's now March and it's not ready. That subcontractor for tile, in the old days, they would have bought that based on when that foundation said it was going to start. They would end up with inventory of tile and flooring sitting in their warehouse that would sit there for days because the contractor, the builder, was behind. And oh, by the way, the shower on the drawing said it was going to be 6 by 6. So they had bought tile for a 6 by 6 shower, but they built it and it was 6 by 7. And so now it's time to install. They don't either have enough tile or it got misplaced. There's all kinds of issues. Fast forward, we've been with them for 7 years now. They estimate they're saving about $1 million a month in carrying costs. That's huge because before, when interest rates were 2-3%, didn't matter. Now that they're 7, 8, 9, 10% for some people for carrying of inventory, it's huge. They also got the win on taxes because no one realizes if inventory is high and goes up, you get taxed on that inventory at tax season. So if you can lower that inventory, they got this huge win savings on taxes as well. There was all these things. That's not where they started. They were just trying to make their people more efficient out in the field. And out of that came these cost savings that nobody even thought about that are true savings to them in the bottom line.
So you've got ongoing value that you're creating that you're able to communicate back to clients. And I guess I'm just curious about how you do that, how you track that, the cooperation you get from clients when you need their help to do that, and how that works for you.
Yeah. So like the flooring company, they were gracious enough. They actually did videos talking about, they did 3 different videos. One, why they went with us, another one, what the experience was like going through it, because change is the biggest tough one that most companies struggle with, that change, and that it's easier doing something the same way you've been doing it, even though it's wrong or not efficient. It's still easier than making the change. And then they talk about life afterwards, and they were gracious enough. And all of my clients, I develop relationships with, and that's why I don't have thousands of clients. I try to keep it small and nimble, so the 125, we're touching them throughout the quarter and making sure things are going well and see where they're at. And that we make sure that those relationships, most of them are in different industries. And so we'll share across industries when we find a win. So there was one up in Troy, Ohio, they needed something where they had spec sheets that came in, and we figured out a way to do OCR. So it would extract that data off those spec sheets and put it in the database and do its magic. That same logic applies to lots of other different industries that they don't compete with. So we were able to share that with several other clients and say, hey, here's something you might think about, that if you're having someone pull data off copies and the templates come in looking the same, we can do this thing and free people up so you can actually be more productive. And a lot of times they've got people in the organization that want to do more, but they're stuck doing a bunch of busy work because the busy work has to get done. We're taking a lot of that busy work off so that individual now can be trained, moved up to other things and be more productive, because unfortunately, employees are doing a lot of, this is where AI comes in. This is the scary part, because there's a lot of stuff that people just do that's repetitive and you really don't think about. You're just doing it. That's where AI can do it. But if you're good, it'll free you up so you can actually have that experience with your clients, or be able to take a lot of this data you got and turn it into information that helps you do more stuff, like that one with the inventory. They freed people up and they started looking. We can reduce inventory. We don't have to buy this stuff at this time. Can you add these fields and these dates? And we'll not do it until we get to this level of the inspection, and life will be better. And so it's just constant sharing and talking to our clients. And God gave you 2 ears, and a lot of us just listening and talking to people and letting them share their experiences.
Yeah, we can't emphasize the word listening there enough, right? People will tell you a lot if you'll just let them.
They love to share. And our process is, we try to do demos and show what we're doing so they get an idea. But then the big aha for us is the whiteboard session. And that's their chance to share with us forms, spreadsheets, reports, all that. And then we ask questions, but I'd say we talk probably 20% of the time in that meeting. They talk 80% of the time. And just, we'll ask a lot of digging questions. The big aha that we usually find out is they think their process is A plus B equals C. And you find out it's A plus B minus B1 plus B2. Susie's over here that she didn't tell anybody that she did this stuff before it gets to C.
Right.
And that comes to light, because that's where you start finding the problems. And my background, this is where that process, I used to be at Frito-Lay, and Frito-Lay is probably the most process-driven company I've ever seen in my life. Back in 1997, it took 80 steps to take a potato to a potato chip. When we got done, we were down to 15 steps. So we went from 80 touches to 15. Every time you touch something is a cost. And so Frito-Lay taught us how to remove steps along the way that didn't really have to happen.
So, Dennis, to the extent you're willing to share here, talk about moving away from hourly pricing to something more value oriented, and just talk about maybe it sounds like you actually converted some clients that were hourly to more of a value based approach. And that can be difficult to do sometimes. Talk about what made that work for you.
So my work team that works with, they still think hourly. So it's okay. I'll take their information that it's going to take this much time. But instead of going to the client and saying, hey, it's going to be 50 hours at $100 an hour, we look at, okay, it's that, there's support, we provide licenses, there's other things we provide. Let's just put it all as a package. We've heard from them that here's where their growth is, here's their budget, those types of things. And I always try to be below their budget if I can. And so we take that information and then come back and say, instead of saying it's 50 hours at this, let's just make this a 2-year contract and we'll just charge this price. And here's all the things you get over 24 months. We know that we're going to make, we know we're going to spend probably more hours in those first 3 months, but then the last 21 months are not going to be nearly as labor intensive on our part. And the revenue begins to come in. And we've looked at where are they either going to be able to grow and do more with it on their side? And are they also going to potentially reduce labor or avoid labor, I'd say, and factor that in and say, okay, you were spending X. Moving forward without us, you're going to spend 3X. With us, you can spend 1X. And here's how you can do this. And so far, they've all bought into it. They understand it and you've got to be honest and open. I don't hide anything from them, but I'm like, you told me that you were going to grow 2X and but you were going to have to put this much labor at it. If you follow this process that we're talking about, you don't have to throw this much labor at it. And here's the savings there. And you still get the 2X that you were going to grow. And we're taking a piece of that potential revenue growth and definitely the cost savings piece and helping them there. But it's still less than if they'd thrown bodies at it, and more efficient and a more positive experience for their customers.
When you say you hope it'll be below their budget, say more about that, because my experience there is that clients don't know what to budget. They don't know what things cost. They don't know what your great services cost. I'm curious about that piece of it.
And that's a good, because sometimes they have no clue.
Right.
Sometimes they have a clue. The ones that tell you, and I was purchasing in the past, they don't usually tell you the whole number. So I had one the other day told me that it was 75,000. I knew it was actually 100,000 he was spending, but it's okay, I'll go with your 75. You knew where it was at, because everybody is a buyer in their mind as well. They're sellers, but they're also buyers.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you have to help create that budget for them around, hey, I heard your sales were this. You said you wanted to grow. Here's what's going. Your profit margin, either they've told you or you can estimate, hey, is 30%, 20%, whatever. Here's how much you would make one way. Here's how much you would make this new way without us. But here's how much we think you would make with us, and just show them the numbers. And also, I show them in labor, because a lot of them, when they look at labor, they think of just the hourly rate. I'm like, okay, but you've got to provide insurance. You've got to provide equipment. You've got to provide space for them potentially. There's all kinds of things that $40,000 employee is actually probably closer to that $60,000 number or greater if they're, and so helping them understand that the light bulb goes on when you start breaking things down into pieces for them to see, okay, here's what's going. Usually they will not terminate an employee. And I always tell people, don't make us a termination, because I don't want to be the negative coming in. But if someone leaves, just don't replace them, because you can readjust your efficiencies that way. Or you can reassign someone to a more productive spot, and use it as a promotion for the person to move them into something that you really need to get done, but you weren't getting done. And so there's ways to look at things differently and help people see that. And sometimes they're stuck in the trees and they can't see it. And you have to be that, again, that's where it's the relationship. So our sales process, we talk to people. I have some that go quick, but it can be 3-6 months before we're even to that whiteboard session, because I just want to get to know you. I'm not even trying to, because I may not be the right fit, and I may tell you there's a better tool out there. Or a lot of times I find you've already got the tool in your shop. You just need to use the thing, or you need to go back to the company you started with and tell them to fix the thing to work right. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time and effort.
I'd love to go on with this conversation, but we need to shift gears here just a little bit, because I do want to get to your podcast. So again, folks, it's WFH with two guys, work from home with two guys. You started it in, I think, August 2020, right? In the pandemic. Why did you start it?
So Benny was in Denver. I'm in Nashville. Like I said, he was a vendor of mine. We had stayed in touch over the years. The pandemic hits. We were calling each other each week just to talk. You were stuck in the house, or you couldn't interconnect with lots of people. And we just started talking, and we're like, this is a podcast. Podcast. I was listening to Gutfeld the other night that he said podcasts are really about relationships. And I think that's what makes podcasts so unique and different compared to the news, because news is just being regurgitated to you. Podcast, the idea is hopefully you've got and you can be a guest, because John, you've been a guest on ours. We're turning around being a guest on yours. There's other listeners out here that may have podcasts that I'm sure you or I would be happy to be guest on.
Yep.
And it's just listening and sharing and talking to people and helping people get ideas. And so Benny and I were talking, and so let's start this. And we didn't start it to make money per se, because again, most of the topics that we talk about, my clients usually call and ask. And I know that I've got a good client that's going to be with me a long time if they're calling and asking about things that are not what we sell. So I was having a lot of them calling, who's your accountant? Who's a good legal person? Who does your website? Who does your marketing? All that kind of stuff. That's okay. Those would be great guests, because then my clients could listen to the podcast and go back, and the library's there. We're on episode 140 coming up. And so they can go back and find anything they want over the years and just re-listen to it. We try to make them, and John, I'm sure yours is the same way, we try to make them timeless as much as possible. AI stuff has changed just a little bit. We talk about it a little bit more. But it was just, it's really like, it started with the two of us, and the first 6 months, it was just Benny and I talking. Then we realized, hey, we need guests. And so after about that, ever since then, we always have a guest on about some topic and just talk about what's going on in their experiences. We make sure they're not salesy, because we heard from our listeners big time that they did not want people that were out there selling their wares. They wanted to hear about a problem. And oh, by the way, the person that's on our podcast probably can help you solve that problem. But that just talking about what's going on. And we've had HR, we've had marketing, we've had accounting, we've had AI. A couple of weeks ago, we had Bitcoin. I didn't understand a thing about it. I'm still a little concerned about it, but it's like, it was interesting. We've had people that are in corporate America, people that left corporate America. It's just a great way to network. I learned something as the host of these things, usually from the guest, even though I know them pretty well or talk to them. But Benny and I are always writing lots of notes and usually following up with them, or a lot of them have written books, and most of them are great books that you should reference or look at because they put thoughts together that it's worthwhile taking time to read them. And we love doing it. It's not designed as a money maker. Again, it's more of a gift back to people in my network that can listen in, and hopefully they'll refer us to people. And we've gotten some business out of it, but that's not our main driver on our podcast.
So tell me the reasons why you think you have gotten business out of it, because even though you set it up not necessarily to get business out of it, you've done that nonetheless. So why has that happened?
Yeah, so we get some, usually either our guest or Benny and I will play. We're going to give you our connections. So we get connections. We get lots of emails from people, some with just questions, someone with referrals. And again, customers have referred me to other people, and they've referenced the podcast. So it's just it used to be when I started the business 13 years ago, a website was your shingle. Now it's like the website's your shingle, but you also need to have either be on a podcast or do a podcast, because it just gives a little more credibility to what you're doing and potentially reaching people that you haven't heard from. For us, this is kind of a fun one. Last summer, we were number one in Egypt and number one in Singapore one week. It's like people, so you reach the people you would never have reached before. It's like how we got to Egypt, I have no idea, but we were the number one podcast in Egypt back in May last year. So it's okay. It's fun.
Now that would be interesting to ask AI that question. Why, what was going on that made WFH with two guys the number one podcast in Egypt in April of 2024 or what have you? Yeah.
So it's just fun, and it's fun. You learn, and Benny and I play well off of each other. And so we come from different backgrounds, and it allows us to just allow two friends to continue the relationship, and we bring in new people and expand our network and relationships. And it's worked out really well. We love doing it.
So what are the lessons you've learned from it? You talked about being able to have folks on, and it's not necessarily you've had strategy changes, but you've learned little things along the way and details that have helped you here and there in your business.
Yeah. One was make sure that they don't sell. We had too many people initially on that were really, they were like a sales pitch. It's like listeners told us really quick. Two, I think it was the second year, we actually created the website so that listeners could give us feedback. And so somewhere in the second or third year, about once a quarter, we tried to take all their questions and just do a podcast with all the questions that come in. And that's worked out really well. Ours is audio right now. The thing where we've talked to some people in September, we're going to go to audio and video. Allows us to get on TikTok and some of these other networks that don't really like just audio. They will like the visual, that they say that will probably increase our reach a lot. So we're working on that. The other one is to make sure you've got someone that can do the editing. In my case, we found my daughter does the editing for us. She does a great job. It was not something that Benny and I were really good at. Making sure you got a platform that works well, because we had some initially that it would record Benny and I, and the guest, it would mess it up and make them have a hard time editing all that stuff out. So we made sure we found the right platform. So just some basics. And then initially, it was hard to find guests at first. Now it's easy because people are listening. We've got a list of about 50 people that have asked to be guests. And so it does take some time, because you can't just have a guest on that you've never met. So you have to talk to that guest, because we had one on that way. That was a disaster. So we learned real quick, you've got to talk to them a little bit, make sure you like them, they like you, customer, and make sure you've got, there's a relationship that kind of begins to come to light. You don't have to spend a long time with them, but just to make sure they understand how you're going to run the podcast, what they're going to talk about. Because this one guy he was talking about he only did physical education for men, and it was just I was appalled because it was just he went off this tangent about how he was never going to help women and all this stuff, and it's okay. That was never
Oh
discussed.
boy.
And it was like, okay, how do you end this graciously without? So instead of a 20-minute, it turned into being like a 10-minute podcast.
Okay.
It's like, okay, usually I don't care about your political views, but that was one. It was like, okay, you're going somewhere that I just don't agree with.
Right.
So that's where we learned you definitely have to talk to people ahead of time and make sure things are kosher with where you stand and where probably your listeners stand.
Mm-hmm.
But just, I'd say, have fun with it. It's a learning for your guests, for your listeners, but it's also for you because it's three guys or three people having coffee, sitting around a coffee table, just talking. And it's just fun.
Dennis, this has been great. And I'd love to keep chatting here, but we'd have to turn this into part 2 and 3 here because I got so many questions for you. So we may have to circle back around.
I'd love to.
Yeah. But before we let you go, I want to make sure that folks know where to find you. If you're willing to put that out there, if they want to be in touch, learn more, maybe about your company and your services, but certainly learn more about you and ask you for any advice, input into what they're up to.
Yeah. You can reach me through emails, probably the best, Dennis J, so DENISJ at WorXSolution.com. And if you reference that we were on John's podcast, I'll give you 30 minutes of free consultation, just talking and trying to understand how we might be able to help you. And if we can, great. If not, 30 minutes of just free time. And just reference the podcast, and that way I can let John know how many listeners reached out to us. But Dennis J at WorX Solution, it's WORX Solution.com. No S at the end, and it's an X, not a K.
Dennis Jackson with WorX Solutions. Dennis, thanks so much for coming on. We really, this has been a lot of fun.
John, I appreciate it. It's great.
Thank you. Hey, folks, thanks for joining us on the price and value journey. And if you've found this episode helpful, please share it with others. And if you're not already a subscriber, please don't forget to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app. If for some reason you didn't like what we had for you today, let me know about that too. Particularly let me know that. Either way, you can contact me at john@johnray.co. That's JOHNRAY.co. If you work as a consultant, coach, accountant, attorney, you're basically selling your expertise and you're having issues in communicating the value that you provide to clients, positioning yourself, developing your business, and setting prices, I wrote a book with you in mind. It's called The Generosity Mindset, A Journey to Business Success by Raising Your Confidence, Value, and Prices. To learn more about that book, you can go to thegenerositymindset.com. On behalf of Dennis Jackson, I'm John Ray. Join us next time on the Price and Value Journey.